The Dalai Lama said it best. He said, the war without will never cease till the war within ceases. So I know what I can do in my little speck of dust on the planet, who is me. I know that if I can shine brighter and I can help other people shine brighter, then that will eventually have an effect.
Any successful relationship starts with finding your center, the truth at the core of who you are. Only then can you develop the ability to truly connect with someone else. Concentric is about aligning with people who share a common center. This show gives you the tools and the skills to do just that through practical training, real-life stories and examples, and in-depth interviews with people who have taken this journey and come out the other side better for it. Welcome to Concentric. We're glad you're here. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Concentric. Today we're talking about reality as a construct. Now, that may sound a little out there, or certainly is a big giant topic, and it really is. And we get into that for sure. But the context that we're talking about that in today has to do, of course, with relationships and interacting with other folks, but gets very quickly into conflict resolution, and really taking a step into not just the understanding, the belief, and okay, I'm in control of this situation, or I may not be interpreting this situation correctly. All of those things, it takes a belief switch to get there, but more importantly, and maybe more difficultly, is when you're in the moment and something's going horribly wrong in your perspective and it's causing an emotional trigger, whether that's with somebody else or just something happening. To be able to stop in that moment and analyze, why am I reacting so negatively in this situation, when it kind of, the first indicators will be that like, this seems like an overreaction, right? Sometimes that's the first indicator, right? And then going through that process from there. So I hope that gives you some context around what we're talking about here with reality as a construct. Gary does an amazing job digging in and really giving us all some incredible, useful tools for moving forward in our life. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode number 12 of Concentric. Gary, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you, my friend?
I am wonderful. This is fun. We're going to kind of reference back to an earlier episode here, really episode 1, when we kind of walked people through the drama triangle and the creator triangle. And today's topic, really, reality as a construct. It's kind of foundational to both of those, right?
It is. It's such a massive topic. It is, we go way out into quantum physics and then bring it right back down into the very context of how we relate to one another. So we're going to keep it in that context of how we relate to one another. But it is, it's a huge topic.
Yeah. And I think, it's it's a monumental shift for folks who get it and make that change and look at their entire life through this lens of, your life is what you make it. It's what you attract. It's how you interpret things, and that causes you to react a certain way. Like, so much, if, I think a lot of people would say 100%, a lot of well-educated, deep into this topic, people would say 100% is created by you. And I think even the most skeptical people can agree that it's at least 75%, right? We're always going to have these wild things come at us, but if we can embrace this fact that so much of what comes into our life that even seems like it's out of left field, we've brought it there. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Maybe it's all just a spectrum of the same, but it's a powerful lens. It's an empowering filter to put on and look at the world this way. It keeps you, certainly it keeps you from being able to like, oh, this person did that to me and this person did that to me. But when you can let all that go, then even if, I don't know how I brought this in my life, but it happened, and move quickly into, okay, what do I do about it? Because I am in control, then things can happen a lot more rapidly. So walk us through the overall concept here and how, it does relate to relationships and, and why it's foundational to the two triangles that we talked about.
Yeah, especially the drama triangle. It's very foundational to that. The bottom line is we have no control over what's happening outside of us, but we've got massive control over the frame we put around it. And based upon the meaning we ascribe to anything is going to be either a heaven or hell that we create between our ears. Personally, I've gotten to the point in my life where I like, I've done just about as much suffering as I care to do. And if I can create more heaven here in my own sort of generator of reality, then I'm absolutely going down that road, because the other one doesn't work. It doesn't work. So when I first came across this concept, I was in an NLP certification. And the trainer presented this NLP model of communication. NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And this is a long time ago when kind of NLP was just first out on the scene. It was a brand new science of how to gain more change in a very, very rapid way. This is what Tony Robbins built his entire scope of interventions on the foundation of neurolinguistic programming. It's some people would equate it to the science of human excellence. I call it the owner's manual for the human mind. If you know how something works, then you can fix it. If you're trying to tune up a car and you don't know how to set the points, or what dimensions to set the points to, or how to actually add what oil weight or tire pressure, it is literally how you get the engine of your life to operate successfully. So this concept came to me in one of the trainings, and they would show this diagram, which was just the profile of a person's head. And they would say about 2 million chunks of data per second comes in through the five senses, our sight, our hearing, our sense of taste, our smell, and our sense of touch. And we delete and distort and generalize all that data, like 2 million chunks, down to about 9 pieces plus or minus 2. So when I thought of that, I thought, okay, well, then most of it just drops right down into the subconscious. And then they say the way that happens is in the filters, which is our collective experience, like all your memories, your use of language, the values that you developed from your memories and from your beliefs. In other words, from birth on, you've been bringing in input data, and all the time from an infant on, you're making up some kind of a meaning about what's bombarding your nervous system. And through those particular core experiences, you develop these constellations of beliefs. And that happens just from the best thing you can make up from the wisdom, intelligence, and life experience of an infant on. So all those things, all those really core beliefs are sometimes being driven by that sort of, childhood intelligence that we all had.
Because something like that gets locked in early on, before there's even a chance to go consciously to go, here's this thing, I believe it means this based on data that's come in, and instead the end result gets locked in there, right? And maybe it's 15, 20 years later and you go, wait a second, why do I think this is this?
Or why do I feel the way I feel in this circumstance?
Yeah.
Because what happens is most people are being triggered emotionally, and they sit back and they scratch their heads like, why am I so upset about this? Or why am I so hurt by that? And
in the best situations, right? If they're intuitive enough and introspective enough, and maybe that's down the line, right? To even take that in and go, why am I even acting this way, because before then, a lot of times it's just, this person always makes me feel this way. This thing does this. And, it's all this external blame for it.
Well, this is the beginning of the drama triangle, because we cannot figure out why we're being triggered off. So our natural inclination of the ego is to project out to something out here to blame for why we feel the way we feel. But oftentimes the reason we feel the way we feel is because of these deep unconscious imprints, these deep, I don't want to call them traumas because people put a label on that word, but core significant experiences that cause us to have some form of an aberration. And because our natural tendency is we go into fight or flight or cortisol and adrenaline gets dumped into the body to protect us from experiencing something from the past that we no longer want to experience again in the now. So we have these protective mechanisms that actually show up and trigger off the fight or flight syndrome. Now, all that said, we have to start looking at how do we start unraveling that mystery? Because if we're going to be successful in a relationship, I've said often that wherever love's present, everything unlike it comes up to be healed. And so when we get into a relationship, oftentimes certain things are being triggered off that we don't understand what it is. I was working with a young man in a breakthrough coaching intensive. That's when someone will fly into Dallas. I work with them for 2.5, sometimes 3 days, 8 to 10 hours a day, and just drill down till we create the breakthroughs. They do a lot of prep work. They come in fully committed, and we always get massive change. But what this individual was looking for is, like, I am so reactive in my relationship. I'm ruining my relationship, but I don't know why I'm doing it. And I don't know why I feel so angry when X, Y, and Z happens. And my partner does this over here. That one behavior makes me go ballistic and it makes no sense. And so we began digging down and digging down and digging down. And what we discovered was that he happened to have been molested by his mother and by an aunt. And so what was happening was any kind of transference that was occurring in the relationship was directly linked to the unhealed issues that had happened in the past. Sexuality was a challenge because he was triggered. It was like fight or flight because he wasn't comfortable when he had someone that he loved, that he wanted to be sexual with, and that he wanted to show love in that way with. It was really difficult for him to link the sort of sex and love together because the initial people that should have loved him actually contaminated that love with sexual behavior. So it was like this big push-pull inside of him, which made him lose most interest in sexuality with a person that he was in love with because it was so emotionally uncomfortable for him. A stranger, no problem. Before he was madly in love, no problem. But as soon as he fell in love, big problem. All triggered off by things that had occurred to him at a very young age on. These core significant events and then constellations of beliefs around them.
Yeah, and so I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I think that story like perfectly illustrates what we're talking about, how that past event can come to the future like this. But I just want to make sure that people don't put that in its own bucket, because that's something that's one of the worst, right? Like to have happen. But this also happens in smaller ways that maybe aren't this devastating thing. Maybe it's a smaller something that happens to you that's just enough of a trigger, or is a big deal to you as a little kid, and that still gets shoved down, a lack of food, a lack of something like that still manifests its way. So I want everyone watching and listening to make sure that they don't just put that in a bucket like, oh, nothing like that's happened, so this doesn't apply to me. It's just one of those things that's kind of like one of the worst, but these happen in other ways.
Right. The continuing examples of this, it is a construct, is I was working with another client, and it was she just could not get her father was deeply emotionally removed because he was working 3 jobs when she was a child. And she was very much like, I just want my dad's attention, just want him to see me. And because he worked all the time, by the time he left in the morning, it was before she got up. By the time he came home, she was already in bed. So she rarely ever saw him and rarely had time. And if he had any time off, which he rarely had, is like 1 day a week, he was mainly asleep. So she had someone that she deeply loved, but never got the affection from, never got the attention from, never had those conversations as a kid. And as a consequence, there was this ache always, this over neediness for male attention, which created lots of different issues for her as she matured into a young woman and began the whole dating cycle and all of that. So she found herself always so compelled and so needy when she would first start dating someone, deeply desiring that soul focus, that soul attention. And when she didn't get it, she would just sink into depression. So there's these really radical forms of that. There's these really mild forms of that. So then the next question is, well, then what the heck do you do with that? How do you begin to start moving out of that? If our lives are constructions of things that we have experienced, and we've made up these beliefs from a small child, which of course we have to make up something, so we'll make up the most obvious. How do we then, as an adult, begin to move out of those patterns? That's really the bigger question. Yes, we are seeing through the filters of our collective experiences and what we made up about it. Mainly when we have past experiences that go emotionally unresolved, they are still alive and well in our filters. Because a trigger out here is going to create a reaction internally that creates some sort of an aberration emotionally as we try to walk through our current reality in peace. It's very, very difficult to do. So as adults, what we have to begin to start developing the courage to do is to look at this construct that I'm living in, my construct. Not good, it's not bad. None of us have done anything wrong. We were kids, we were coming out into the world and experiencing what we're experiencing. We grew up in our family systems. They, of course, didn't mean us any harm, but maybe their own unhealed lives caused us some harm. Now it's our responsibility. It's like the light that we carry is oftentimes the light that our ancestors dropped. It's like, so they didn't have the tools back there. We have more tools and systems today than we have ever had to change the construct, neutralize the emotions from the past, and grow into what our life purpose and our life vision for ourselves is. Because every one of us is here to do something that only we can do. And there's a few boulders from our past that generally cloud that path, that do not allow us to actually emotionally fully step in to what we're here to do. So this is where some of the process work comes in so beautifully. I've spoken to you before about, the memory resolution technique, which is one of the best techniques to learn to start neutralizing the things of the past, because it works so simply, so eloquently, and it is fast and it's permanent. The bottom line is, that is a system. At some point, what we'll do is I'll drag someone into my office where we're filming, and I'll do a process with it. But what I want to share with the audience now is that the thing that we can begin to do to start shifting things for ourselves is begin to start looking at, okay, so we have these triggers that aren't quite emotionally dissolved yet or emotionally neutral. They're running us. The way that we can begin to start interrupting those particular reactions is a little piece that I learned from an associate of mine named Byron Katie. I had the great good pleasure of spending some time with Byron. This was before she was really, really famous. She wrote the book, Loving What Is. and I'm sure she's written other books as well. But she's quite an enlightened soul. I'll tell you the story later, how we met. But she has the 4 questions, which are great. Highly recommend the book. I've abbreviated them some because it's just a little bit faster, and I want someone to be able to use it quickly to shift the mindset within a few minutes. And the first question is, as someone's speaking and they're viewing out of their construct, out of their filters, out of the collective experience, and they know they're overreacting, but they can't contain it, you have to ask yourself, is what I'm believing or thinking true? Can I really absolutely know that what I'm thinking and feeling is absolutely true? Because just because you feel it emotionally, that just means you're being triggered off. That doesn't mean it's true. It just means you have this emotional reaction to it. So the first question is it true? Can I really know it's true?
And give us an example of that too, right? So, and that's a big one, right? It's a big one to put on the brakes in such an emotional state.
It makes you question whether what you're making up about the situation, how you're interpreting the situation, is that really the truth?
Yeah. So like in an argument, or someone's done something and that's what you're mad about, your logical mind at the moment, is saying this person hates me because they did this and didn't show up or something. And so in that moment, we need to go like, okay, I know they didn't show up. That's true. That's a physical thing. But do I really know their intention behind it? Is that what you're getting at with this first question?
That is exactly what I'm getting at. Now, this, of course, is excluding someone who's doing physical violence. That's true. You're getting hit. That's true. The course of action you have is to walk out the door. That's your course of action. Get a restraining order, walk out the door. Let's just be really practical. But what I'm speaking about is these emotional ramifications that happen inside of us a lot, especially in business, especially in our core relationships. So many times people will say, I know exactly why they did what they did. I know what they're thinking. I know what they're feeling. And I'm like, maybe not, maybe not, because we're looking out of our own set of experiences. So the first question is it true? Second question is, who am I without this belief? Like, if I did not have this belief right now, who am I? Without this belief, who the heck am I? What that does is it stops you in the moment to question your reality by asking, is it true? Secondly, who am I without this belief? Returns you back to a sense of your own personal alignment. So who am I without this? The third question is...
Before we get to the third, though, walk us through practically. So maybe it's that same situation, right? Someone didn't show up. You've gone from 0 to 100 like that because they did, and you have this belief. Yep. So first off, you're going, okay, let me stop. Is that true that they hate me and they're a horrible person for not showing up? And so with the second question, who am I without this belief? Walk us through, what does that mean? What's that thought process in that scenario?
Okay. So I was working with another client the other day, and he had sent in a very large corporate contract for a really big gig. And he was saying, well, God, they haven't responded to my emails. They haven't, I don't know if they've looked at it. I don't even know. I sent off an email saying, can you please verify that you got the proposal? No answer, no reply. So he's like, oh man, I did something wrong. I messed up in some way. What if I had a bunch of misspelled words in the contract? Did I do the conversations right? It went on and on and on. And then he was like, I'm maybe just not good enough. And so I had him go through this process, and he went to, oh, okay, is what I've just said, is that absolutely true? And he goes, I can't know that. No, there could be 100 things that happened over in that office. Maybe some big contract exploded on them and they have to fully focus on that. And then I asked him, okay, well, who are you without that belief that you're not enough, you've done something wrong, everything's messed up, you're never going to succeed? And he said, well, none of that. Well, if it's not true, I can't know it's true. Then who I am my confident self, that if this doesn't pan out, I just go to another contract. I find another lead. I just keep pursuing business. That's all that means. It's not the right client. I went, yeah, exactly. So first is it true? Can I really know it's true? Second step is, who am I without this belief system? Third step is, what would I prefer to be thinking about that would bring action and that would bring me peace and that would move me through? And when you do those three questions to yourself, your mind has to change. And then I said, what would you prefer to be thinking about right now? That would return you back to action, to your own alignment, and to peace. And he said, I'm talented. I know my stuff. And if it's not the right person and if it's not the right set of people to work with, then I don't want to work with them. I just go and I find the right one. And I was like, exactly. And I said, what are you going to do now? And he said, I'm going to send out another couple of proposals. I'm going to get into a few more networking groups and I'm going to generate some more business. I went, awesome. He was nosediving for about 4 days. And he got himself in such a state that he was entering this really deep state of depression. And I was like, well, you can do that because you got two paths always in front of you. You could go down the road of I'm not good enough and let all the evidence from your past that you've ever constructed in your life to I'm not good enough, or you can go down the other road of all your wins, and whatever you're going to focus on, you're going to make yourself stronger in whatever arena that is. So why, I think we've all suffered enough. Why would we want to make ourselves suffer more from something that is a construct, not a reality, but something we've made up, that we have evidence to both sides of it, both sides of that equation? Why not pick the one that's actually going to give us the results that we want to achieve? So when we look at something as I won't say it's minor, because it's not, because his business is his identity. So once we do that, once he got to that, I said, how are you going to use this from now on? He said, I'm going to spend a lot less time in fear. I went, great. He said, I'm going to write these questions up on my bathroom mirror because I want to remember each one of them and I'm going to work the hell out of them. And I'm like, that's exactly right. Because what it does is it returns you back to a sense of responsibility for what and how you operate in the world. All of our behavior is emotionally driven. If we don't take charge personally of the quality of the emotions that we walk around in, if we don't take charge of that, if we think somehow our emotions are going to change by something outside of us happening, it can, but we don't manage it then. What we have to learn how to do is have mental, emotional management tools, especially as an entrepreneur, especially as a parent, because parents have to stay at this really high level emotionally because kids will drain you dry. Being an entrepreneur can drain you dry just because there's so much ambiguity in it. So we have to keep our vibrational areas up, and we have to keep what we want in front of us, what we're focused on, where our vision is, and keep it in front of us. Sidestep any boulders in our path, walk around them, walk through them, jump over them, but go to the next iteration of where you feel like your success is going to be. We don't have time to hang out in these self-created emotional states that aren't even true.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you want to take a deep dive into the concepts Gary is talking about here and so much more, I've got something for you. From time to time on the show, you may hear us talk about Gary's course, Creating Incredible Relationships. This course is the culmination of Gary's 35 years worth of seminars, one-on-one training, and transforming the lives of over 11,000 people on 4 different continents. to learn how to build alignment, and heck, just get along with others sometimes. We all require skills that are not commonly known and are not out there in the relationship development space. We need help. That's why Gary put this course together. The content in it is powerful and comprehensive. But just like we've done with this show, it's put together in a way that's easily consumable and quickly implemented. To gain the ability to take every relationship you have or want to have to the next level, go to garyscourse.com and see how to get started. Now, back to the show. And I think like a lot of skills that you learn, I think this is one that it really takes studying, practicing, beforehand, before you're in the middle of things, because that's the hardest time to remember it. Yeah,
with the little events of your life, where it's not so emotionally impactful.
Right. And then slowly over time, you'll be able to stop in the middle of full scale, freak out or deep dive into, the darkness there, and to go, oh, okay, hang on. And let me walk through these 3 questions. So yeah, that's really, really powerful.
When you do this, I mean, oftentimes we require the simplest tools to get us to a place where we can be more emotional resourceful. There are so many other much broader, deeper tools that can be utilized. But this one is incredibly simple. It works. It gets people out of a negative state and has them get into the idea that they can shift the constructs by asking the right questions of themselves.
Is there a version of this that you can walk someone through? Let's say they're on the receiving end of someone in full scale freak out. How would you approach sort of like, if in your mind you're like, Gary's, Gary and Byron Katie's three steps, like it's triggering for them. How would you almost do that for them if you're encountering that and being on the receiving end of that?
So if someone is on the receiving end of it and someone is freaking out in front of you, the last thing that you want to do is try to, in that freak out, become very super reasonable, because you're completely mismatching where they're at emotionally. So there's different ways to do that. You can match the energy behind their speech. So let's say someone comes in and you're a customer service rep in some sort of business. And someone comes in and goes, I cannot believe that you have done that. Like, your company has done this and blah, 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 blah. And they're talking about that speed, that speed and that kind of hand movement and that kind of energy behind their voice and their physiology. What you can do is match the energy, the tonality, and the speed, as well as the hand movements, to begin to start winding them down off the ledge. So what you can do is go, I fully understand what you're saying. I so apologize. We're going to do everything we can to start rectifying this problem for you. So just, if you would, sir, just allow yourself a moment and let me look and see what we can begin to do. So you pace them right up front, you match them, and then you slowly start lowering your voice and slowing your voice down. That pacing until you can lead piece is really important, because communication is 55% of the meaning of how people read you. So I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Our body, our physiology is 55% of the meaning of our communication. So we want to be able to use everything, match the tone and tempo of their voice, not the words. The
Yeah, not that.
tone,
Yeah, not the emotion, but
not the
yeah.
emotion, but the urgency. It's the urgency that you match. And then match the physiology. Next thing that you need to be doing internally, and this is a bigger leap. This is a harder leap. And this depends on whether your construct is filled with abusive people that you have never resolved before. But if, let's say, you have a certain level of peace about you, then this is the most effective thing. I may have mentioned it before. I'll mention it again because it always bears mentioning. The HeartMath Institute is an organization that studied how human beings influence one another. And they discovered there was an energetic field issuing off the body 15 feet from the body, measurable by science, that influences and affects other people. So if you have a person that is freaking out in front of you, one of the things that I find has been super effective for me is I ask myself, what emotion would have to be present? What could have possibly occurred today in this person's life that would cause them to be this reactive? First of all, what's the emotional state do I think is present? And then what else could have occurred that would have caused this person to be kind of losing the plot? And when I can go there, what happens is there's a certain level of empathy, compassion, and understanding that begins to emerge inside of me. When that happens, there's an energetic field that begins to occur that starts to soften everything. When I can speak to that, let's say it's in a customer service context, I could say something like, I understand it's really hard right now for all of us, and it's fine if you're upset. I get that there's probably lots of stress factors in your life. I know there are in mine, and let's just see if we can really bring this to resolution so you have the least amount of frustration from our end. Now, if someone spoke that way and started speaking to what they could safely assume was more of the root cause of why this person was responding the way that they were, what you're actually doing is you're stepping into more of your own humanity, which is probably what they're lacking right now. They're lacking a sense of being connected to. They've been maybe perhaps betrayed. It's total mind read on my part, but something has happened that has caused emotional upset. And if you can begin to start addressing that, speaking to that, that then begins to start being the fastest way to put water on the fire instead of kerosene on the fire. Because when a person is in that state, it's next to impossible to wind them down off the ledge by reasoning or yelling back. That doesn't work. You have to address the emotional driver underneath it.
Yeah, and that's really great too, because if you approached it logically, like, oh, I have these 3 steps, I know how to fix this person right now. Like, I know you're really upset, but here's why. Because step 1, you need to.
No. Those 3 steps are for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't
that
present them to the other person.
Yeah, but to have that knowledge to go. And that's what I was getting at. And it answered perfectly, because it isn't doing the opposite. It isn't flipping that back and walking them through the 3 steps. It is using that. Yeah, and using that information to go like, oh, okay, I've been there. I know what stage they're in right now, and kind of guiding them around emotionally and, bring them down. And then maybe we can, have that reasonable discussion. But until they're in that state, it's never going to happen.
No, it's never going to happen. And so, when we look at being in a relationship and how do we deal with people that are volatile, first of all, it is a very big challenge. And that person who is volatile needs to at least be willing to do some work upon themselves. Otherwise, you're going to be in the drama triangle, being either the rescuer or the hero or the villain. And if that's the role that people want to play, have at it until you become exhausted. Then you choose not to be in it. So the bottom line is, don't marry potential ever. Marry the willingness. Marry they already have done some work, or they're willing to do more work. marry that part of a person that goes, I've suffered enough, I'm done with it, I'm going to find the answers. Don't marry potential, don't rescue the walking wounded, have compassion. But if you attempt to do that, unless that person is deeply committed to their own personal evolution, you're entering the drama triangle that you'll stay in for years, attempting to rescue someone that may or may not want rescuing.
Yeah.
So
that's powerful.
these are places that I think all of us need to address. But again, I could speak for days on this subject of it being a construct, our reality being a construct. At some point, we'll go way deeper into this concept. But to wrap this up a bit, it is how the drama triangle starts. It's that we look out of the lens of our collective experience. We feel a certain trigger. We feel upset in some way, or something is triggered off issues that have been unresolved from our past. And of course, what's standing in front of us is whatever the trigger is. And of course, the trigger looks like that's the cause. But it is not necessarily the cause. It is the reminder of what we have not resolved. And here it is again. And our little reptilian brain is dumping cortisol and adrenaline. We said, oh, hell no, never again. I'm never experiencing this again. And instead of bringing a BB gun to a fight, you bring nuclear weapons, because all that back there is still up and alive in your nervous system. So what we have to begin to look at is, how do I wind myself down off that ledge? And the 3 questions will help you get there. Is it an absolute like, oh, my past is resolved because I've asked myself 3 questions? No, but it's what you utilize to get yourself to cause no more damage and to allow you to step into this place that's more aligned to who you've come here to be. Because when we harm another, believe it or not, we actually add to the lowering of our own self-esteem. When we cause injury to another, we hurt ourselves. And the more that we cause injury, and we don't have emotional control, and our mouths are running amok, and we're causing damage, we do not walk away from those experiences feeling uplifted. We walk away from those experiences carrying shame. And over time, my big thing for me is like, I ask myself, okay, in this moment, I'm really angry, I'm really upset. And if I act out of that upset, I'm going to carry that with me my whole life. And if I act out of the congruency of what I know is true, but I don't feel it's true right now, I'm just so pissed off. But if I act out of that congruency that I know builds love and peace inside of me, then that is going to be a jewel in the crown of my identity, because I refuse to follow the pattern of my anger. I chose to do it differently, deeper in alignment to who I'm evolving myself to be. And as I practice that, I become that faster. But if I continue to let myself run amok like a wild animal, which I can easily do, then what happens is I don't move in the direction of where I desire to go. So it's quite a selfish thing, me attempting to be quite kind, because if I don't, I know that I'm prolonging that end goal for myself. So don't do it for other people. Do it for the evolution of you. And other people get to benefit as a consequence. If you're tired of suffering, treat other people with enormous kindness and generosity. And don't be a pushover, but have incredibly strong boundaries. But when you do that, the level of self-esteem that you begin to achieve, your success is in direct proportion to it. It goes up like that. And the more you betray that in yourself, your self-esteem nosedive, as does your sense of success, because you won't feel worthy of receiving it.
It's powerful. It's powerful. So I think this can be really step one for somebody who hasn't had that view of things, of life, of reality, of relationships, and then have this somewhere to remind them over and over again, because there's such truth in that. But it's easy to fall back in our reactive mode and everything. But I love that, how you laid that out for folks to really process this in not just a healthy way, but in a way that's going to move them forward.
Well, I really do honestly, authentically care for people. And I know how much suffering is in the world, especially now. It's a bit heartbreaking. And the Dalai Lama said it best. He said, the war without will never cease till the war within ceases. So I know what I can do in my little speck of dust on the planet, who is me. I know that if I can shine brighter, and I can help other people shine brighter, then that will eventually have an effect. And so we just all have to begin to start pulling together and heal the war within ourselves, and especially within our relationships. And once we can begin that, I think that we will live a much stronger and more beautiful life. Our children will be imprinted by that, and that will imprint down the generations. We might as well be the one in our ancestral line that holds up the light and says, I'm going to do it differently. I'm not going to pass on the patterns of my parents that I was wounded by. I'm not going to pass that on to my kids and then their kids. For generations upon generations, someone has to have the courage to stand up, the will, the strength, the love, and say, I'm going to do it differently. And hopefully that's you.
I love it. Gary, thank you so much.
So welcome, my friend. Always good to have a conversation with you. Always.
Absolutely. Everyone, I hope you've gotten as much out of this as I have. Powerful words, powerful, really insights. So join us next time for Concentric. We'll see you then.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Concentric. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd certainly like a great review from you on your favorite podcasting platform. But more than that, what really makes a difference to a show like ours is a recommendation to someone who would love this show like you do. Word of mouth referrals to your network and your podcast devouring friends is incredibly helpful to the growth of this show. For episode links and info, go to concentricshow.com. Thank you so much, and remember to keep building alignment to build a better life.